would the Hudson's Bay Company spend 40 years building a fort, only to surrender it at its first battle, before one shot was even fired? The cover-up story of Fort Prince of Wales. Allegedly built by James Knight and his men in 1717 for the Hudson's Bay Company, it was initially a log fort that was established as a fortified distribution center for various items such as furs and oils. James Knight went missing 2 years after establishing the log fort. He left with his men on an expedition to find the fabled Northwest Passage and was never heard from again. Why would James leave on an extremely dangerous expedition only 2 years after establishing the fort? This would leave the fort vulnerable and would hardly have been enough time to explore and establish fur trade routes. After the loss of James Knight, there is no record of who was leading the affairs of the fort from 1719 to 1766. Yet, in 1731, someone made a decision to upgrade the fortifications from log to stone. This is bizarre for a number of reasons aside from being unclear as to who ordered the upgrade. At the time the upgrade supposedly began, the fort was 14 years old and had not once experienced any battles or even a confrontation. The Treaty of Utrecht had just been signed in 1713 between several powerful countries including Great Britain, France, Portugal, Savoy, Spain, and the Dutch Republic. In addition to that, the local Indians traded peacefully and even worked alongside the people of Fort Prince of Wales, meaning there was absolutely no threat and no reason or motivation that would explain the initiation of upgrading the fort from log to stone. The proof is in the pudding. The fort didn't see a battle until 51 years after upgrades apparently began. When that battle finally did arrive in 1782, the fort surrendered without one shot being fired from either side. The official reason given is this: there wasn't any soldiers at the fort. There were 39 people made up of trappers, masons, and scientists, including the then fort governor Samuel Hearne. The invaders were a French force of 290 men on 3 ships, led by a man named Jean-François de Gallo. They took over the forts and allowed the occupants to return home to England. The French would spend the next few weeks trying unsuccessfully to destroy the fort. This includes the manpower of the 290 men and all the ammunition they brought, including the cannons on their ships. How is it possible that a fort built by 39 people could not be undone by a force of 290 people? How is it possible that a fort could not be destroyed when every other fort built by the Hudson's Bay Company had been destroyed and rebuilt several times over? After some time, the French left, and Samuel Hearne and the same group of trappers, masons, and scientists reclaimed the fort. Still, no soldiers. They occupied the fort for another 3 years, but eventually abandoned it, claiming its condition no longer made it a viable place of defense. Never mind that they still didn't bring any soldiers to defend it. Just consider that the fort proved to be beyond formidable when the French failed to destroy it. It makes absolutely no sense to abandon the only fort that was able to withstand a direct assault. Which brings us to its construction. Why would you design a fort to have no less than 40 cannons, but not one soldier to operate them? Even after having to surrender the fort due to the lack of soldiers. Herein lies the strongest evidence that the story of Fort Prince of Wales is a cover-up. Have a look at the mortar that is between the blocks in this picture. See its raised edge, how it is not flush with the stone. That is because what you are looking at is some sort of cosmetic application applied to the wall after it was built. This provides absolutely no strengthening or extra support to the wall. Thus, the only reasoning one can deduce is that the mortar is nothing more than cosmetic. Here is an older picture showing the same corridor. The raised mortar that we see there today is nowhere to be found. In fact, the building style of the fort is astoundingly similar to the construction methods used in ancient and megalithic sites around the world. Perhaps this was the purpose of the mortar, to hide the fort's method of construction and thus hide its true age. There are structures in and around the fort that use mortar and unshaped stones, a completely different building technique than the main fort. There is an odd structure near the fort that is theorized to have been used as storage. There is also a structure across the water that is said to be a complement to the cannon battery. a 3.5-foot high wall made of mortar and unshaped stones with slots for 6 cannons. These cannons would not have been able to turn, giving them a uselessly small window in which they would have been able to hit the enemy. Again, 6 cannons, yet 0 soldiers. Here is what is said to be the ruins of Samuel Hearne's house. Notice the size of the men relative to the building. Once again, the age of the weathering looks much older than 270 years, and looks much more like the ancient megalithic structures. The story of upgrading the fort from log to stone really falls apart when you analyze it. Consider the environment in which the fort was built. The average temperature here is negative 7.1 Celsius, which is 19.2 Fahrenheit. In the winter, which is 8 months out of the year, the temperature can regularly reach negative 51 Celsius, which is negative 59.8 Fahrenheit. With that in mind, consider that at the time of the fortification upgrade, they had little to no manpower. There has never been, by any public record, more than 39 people at the fort at any one time. This is only slightly considered by the official story, as it is said that the upgrades took 40 years to complete. However, that is exactly what raises the question: why? Why undertake such a laborious task in an unforgiving environment, one that would take you 40 years to complete because you have such little manpower? This is essentially the only story that would be at all believable other than the truth. It would be next to impossible to lie and say there were hundreds of people building the fort, as with other larger forts that were built in a fraction of the time in comparison. The reason so few people were there then is the same reason so few people are there now. The environment is harsh. Churchill, Manitoba is known to be the polar bear capital of the world, seeing hundreds of polar bears gathering every fall. It is estimated that this annual gathering was in the thousands in the 1700s. This, combined with the 8 months of winter at dangerously cold temperatures and 0 good farming land, it was impossible to get anyone to migrate there. Even today, Churchill only has a population of 813 people as of 2011, nearly 300 years after it was established. Even if there was hundreds of people there in the 1700s, it's still hard to imagine how they managed to quarry the massive stones weighing thousands of pounds from sites that are mostly across the river. All of the quarry sites, much like the fort itself, resemble quarries near ancient megalithic sites around the world. Here is a picture of the machinery required for us to simply restore the fort. How did they build it from scratch nearly 300 years ago with no electricity in a harsh environment with only 39 people? Oh, I forgot to mention, while all this was going on, they were apparently able to map over 250,000 square miles of northern Canada. Who were these brave, ingenious, miraculous souls that were able to withstand these harsh temperatures and do the impossible, all in the name of collecting furs? Aside from the fort's governor Samuel Hearne, well, there's no official public record. Apparently, building an indestructible fort wasn't a great enough achievement to make note of, so none of the construction nor its builders were documented. That's unfortunate. In fact, not only was there no documentation made, but strangely, a lot of writing all over the fort seems to have been deliberately destroyed. Yet again, another similarity to many ancient sites. Here is a section of wall with a name and date etched into it. H. Robinson, 1753. All around this are areas that appear to have been scratched out in an effort to erase what? Names and dates of the true builders? Here you can again see sections of the cosmetic mortar falling off, revealing the stone-on-stone construction hidden behind. Here is another section of the wall with a stone that contains a family name, a year, and an odd word etched into it. Irvin is a Scottish family name. Scotland and Britain united in 1707 to become Great Britain, which is when Scottish soldiers began enlisting. 1752 could be the year this was carved, but it could also represent any number of things. The way Slush is written, one would assume that this is the home of the etcher. However, if you look, you won't find any location, old or new, called Slush in Scotland, England, or Canada. Consider the penmanship the etcher was able to achieve. There is a space between the SLU and the SH that looks deliberate, which would make it slew. SH. Now, if you search, you will find that slew is an old word, meaning to turn or to twist in place, or to turn without moving. It is a word shrouded in mystery, as no one really knows where, why, or how it originated. Slew was primarily used as a nautical term to describe the action of a ship turning in its place. SH is a symbol still used today on nautical maps to indicate the type of bottom or seabed in a given area. In this case, SH means shells. So when you combine the meaning, the carving here of slew SH could be interpreted as the unmoving turning shell, or the twisting shell. Here you can again see an area that appears to have been scratched out, and the cosmetic mortar falling off as well. There is one more thing that is etched into one of the stones in the fort. You may recognize this symbol of a G, ruler, protractor, and sun rays. It is a well-known symbol of the mysterious Freemasons. The Freemasons are connected with many ancient and megalithic sites around the world. This symbol found in the fort is the oldest known symbol of the Freemasons in Manitoba, and it is one of the oldest known symbols in all of Canada. The attack on the fort was led by a man named Jean-François de Galaup. It was a top-secret mission planned by him, the Minister of the Navy, and the King of France himself. Jean-François had orders that could supersede any other commander to take over their ship and soldiers at any moment and use them to attack the forts. When he finally did, he kept the location secret from everyone but one officer, and didn't even pack any cold weather clothing for the soldiers in an attempt to hide the final destination of the ship. After taking over the fort and failing to destroy it, Jean-François went back to France in 1783 and met with the king. Immediately they started planning another expedition. This one would go around the world, stopping at ancient sites including the native Indian mounds of California, Nazca lines of Peru, Easter Island, and coming to rest in Botany Bay, Australia in 1788. He sent a letter to the king saying he'd be back by June 1789. That was the last anyone ever heard from him or his crew. A year later, the French Revolution began on July 12, 1789. Many others close to the king went missing in that year leading up to the revolution. To this date, though some evidence of wreckage has been found of one of the ships from the fleet, it is still unclear what happened to Jean-François and his crew of over 200 people. You may not agree with my theory that this building was found rather than built. However, with all the information we have, there shouldn't be any doubt that at the very least there is more to the story than the general public is being told. Thank you so much for watching. Check the About section for sources, and please subscribe to get notified of the next video. Bye for now.